Hi guys, it's Kelly Scheffler with the Green Team at Exit Realty Crutcher. And as you know, this week we've had a significant amount of rainfall. And we just kind of thought it'd be a good idea to have a conversation about flood insurance and how that can affect a buyer or a seller. So FEMA, they said that flooding is the number one cause of property damage. And when you are purchasing a home and you're using a lender, that lender is going to require that you have flood insurance if your home is located in a FEMA flood zone. And there's flood maps that they give statistics on how likely it is for that particular area or property to flood. So they have things like A, AE, X, which are found on the flood map that would then determine which level you would be at. And that level then dictates how much your premium's going to be. So one of the questions that we always recommend that you ask is if this property is in a flood zone, because that is going to affect your buying power. If you are looking to purchase a property that is at the top of your price range, you may not be able to purchase a home that's located in a flood zone just because they're going to take that into consideration. Because actually, your homeowner's insurance is a separate policy than your flood insurance. So you would actually have two policies. Your regular homeowners and then your flood insurance would be on top of that. So if you don't have flood insurance, and you are in an area that does flood, standard homeowners insurance does not cover that. Also, like if you're paying cash for a particular property, you don't have to have flood insurance because you would be assuming all of the risk. So if that property were to have some damage from flooding, then it would be on that person that owns the property at the time to fix it. So the properties that are in higher flood areas, they're going to more than likely be required to have flood insurance if you're getting a loan. Now, that being said, you may be in an area that doesn't require flood insurance, but you could have some areas that are surrounding that. And if the lender requires that you have flood insurance, it would also be mandatory at that time too. So if you are kind of a little nervous that you're not in a flood zone, but that it could happen at any point, you can get flood insurance, and it would, probably be less expensive because you're actually not in a flood zone. So you can get it even if you're not in a flood zone. When you are selling your home, this is going to be something that's going to come up. If you are in a flood zone for a potential buyer, they're going to know what your premium is, because they may be able to take over that policy, and it's being grandfathered in, so they could potentially just take over that policy. Now, sometimes we run into the seller, just to ease the buyer's mind, they will go ahead and offer to pay maybe the first year of homeowners flood insurance policy for them. Most states require that it be disclosed whether or not you are in a flood zone, which in Kentucky, it's part of the MLS. We have to know whether it's in a flood zone. But sellers should also keep really good records if they are in a flood zone. If they've not been affected by a flood, it's always nice to be able to tell the buyer, like, hey, I've been here for 10 years and nothing's ever happened. I've been here for 5 years and year 4 we had a flood. If you have been affected by a flood, then you would want to keep the records of when the flood happened, where it happened. Let's just say it's just in your basement. They would want to know that, where it happened and when it got fixed and who fixed it. So try to keep really good records of the documentation of when something occurred or when it happened. You know, if you border a flood zone, but you're not necessarily in one, that's always good to know as well, because flood insurance changes all the time. So if the property's in a high risk area, now it may not always be, or if it's not in an area now, it could be tomorrow. And that is just all based upon the flood maps, because they do get updated and they do change. So if the property is in a high risk area, then the insurer may want a copy of an elevation certificate. So just kind of keep those things in mind when you are looking to buy or sell a home that happens to be in a flood zone. Thanks.